Hello everyone, my name is Brian Becker and welcome to the channel Singularity as Sublimity. I'm doing this special video to celebrate the fact that we achieved 100 subscribers, and I wanted to just thank all of you who are among the first 100 to subscribe to this channel. I hope this is the start of something that will continue to grow over time. I celebrate 100 subscribers not because on the big scheme of the YouTube world it's a large number, but I think given the content that is being covered in this channel, it's more remarkable accomplishment than when it comes to some other topics, because we're diving deep into theory, whether it's in psychoanalysis or philosophy, and it's a less common area of interest, especially going to things with that level of depth. So I'm very encouraged to know that there are those out there who are interested in similar things, and that we can sort of have this as a space to go deeply together in these texts. So as part of this celebration, I thought I would provide a little insight into how I go about making my Lacan videos, or more specifically, how I read the Lacan text in preparation for making the videos. So this is not going to be about the technical side of things, how I record and edit and do all that, which maybe that'll be something I'll spend more time on in the future. But I wanted to at least give you a little insight as to how I approach a text. Maybe it'll help you in terms of thinking about how to approach it yourself. So the first thing is, of course, having the right materials, and primary material is the text itself. You have to have the book, and this is primarily what I spend most of my time with. But I also have the French text as well. I have Freud's text. Sometimes it helps to see how the translator is making choices from the French into the English, or how Lacan is uniquely sometimes interpreting the German words that Freud uses. The next big step is approaching the reading process itself. I usually approach a text with thinking about a certain set of questions that are going to help focus my mind. And one of the major questions I ask is, what is the internal logic of the lecture I'm reading? One of the difficulties in reading Lacan, that you've probably noticed if you've read him as well, is losing the thread of the main idea. It can feel at times in reading him that the ideas are disconnected, that all of a sudden you'll be talking about one thing and then you'll be moving on to a different topic, and you don't know how the two connect to each other. I've often been amazed how almost every time they do, but it's not clear, and that may be due to a lack of background knowledge. It may be certain assumptions that Lacan is making that I haven't gained access to. It's also part of his way of thinking, that he doesn't think in a linear fashion. He will go about introducing several ideas, but almost always at the end, it all gets tied together. So one of the ways that helps me maintain that thread is by outlining the text. And I do this in one of two ways. I first have a notebook and pen with me, and I kind of do mind mapping of ideas so I can try to see how they're connected to each other. So I'll draw a phrase or a word, and I'll then have different kinds of lines indicating relationships to other ideas or how they're connected to examples. After I've read an entire lecture and have outlined it in this way, I go back and reread everything from the outline and see if there's some coherence, and see what kinds of connections emerge now that weren't apparent to me while actually reading the text. And very often I'll find the point that Lacan was talking about at the end directly connects with the point he started off with in the beginning of that lecture. This then allows me to then do an outline of the outline. I'll try to organize the different ideas according to topics, and sometimes that won't always follow the order in which that information is presented in the text. Along with that, I'm asking another set of questions that helps organize my thinking. One of those questions is, what do I understand and what do I not understand? And in some ways, this is influenced by Lacan himself, who encourages us to pay attention to the moments of not understanding. But also it helps me think about what might be the best things to put into these videos, because although I do try to cover a great deal of the lecture in the video, I make choices to leave things out. If something is very clear to me, it may be that I'm not understanding it quite as well, paradoxically. And then there are a lot of things at times that I have no clue what's being said. So I'm not really sure how to digest it in such a way as to present it to someone else. But within that space of the clearly understandable and the incomprehensible is sort of a middle ground where I'm sort of at the edge of my thought. And that is what piques my interest and what I try to speak to in my videos. Of course, it's going to connect with both ends of the spectrum, but that's sort of my point of gravity, is that edge of understanding and not understanding. Another question I ask is, what background knowledge may be helpful to understand what's being talked about? A good heuristic to consider is that when you're kind of lost in something Lacan is saying, is to ask yourself, where is Freud coming into play here? Because very often everything he says, or almost everything, connects back to Freud. But it's also the case that sometimes the reasons why he's going in certain directions has to do with other thinkers, Hegel, Saussure, Heidegger. I try to pay attention to the philosophical context that he might be addressing as well. And given my own interest, I spend a good amount of time unpacking that part of it. After reading Lacan for a while, I'm kind of convinced that you can probably teach yourself almost the entire history of philosophy by reading his lectures and then following up on the ideas he explores. Lacan is an incredibly broad thinker, perhaps broader than any other thinker I've ever come across. So it's a teaching opportunity to look into the ideas that he is bringing up. I also ask myself how this lecture and the ideas in it connect to previous ideas already covered. And so sometimes I'll actually read the previous scripts where that idea comes up and see if it's repeating something that's been said, elaborating, or maybe even seeming to contradict it. And I'll sometimes try to bring that back into the video. I'll also ask how the ideas in a particular lecture connect with ideas that will be covered in the future. In future seminars or maybe in the Acree. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself because a lot of that needs to be contextualized, and I don't want to oversimplify things that will come in the future. But every once in a while, I'll try to maybe throw a hint out there as to something now that will connect to another idea in the future. So that's my general mindset and approach to reading the text. From there, after I've outlined it and outlined the outline, I then have to turn it into text. And while doing that, I try to identify 3 questions that can frame the video. Often those emerge through the reading process, but the questions I start off with sometimes change over time because first off, I try to keep it to 3 and I might begin with 5 or 6. And in the process of outlining, I noticed that maybe 2 of the questions are asking about the same thing or that they can be sort of subsumed into a bigger question. And then I typically aim to keep the videos around 10 minutes. They've ranged so far between about 5 to 15. And I plan on continuing to do this for every published seminar. Eventually, if I get to a place where there's a French version but no English version, I will tackle that. That might take a little longer to get through them. So I'm just about done with seminar 1, and it will have taken me about 6 months to get through that one. If I was to continue on that pace, I would be done with all the seminars that are published in about 8 years. I do hope to pick up the pace a little bit more. I've already done that in the last couple months. I've been putting them out more often. I see these videos have been shared many times, and I ask that as long as you continue to get some benefit from these videos, that you consider continuing to share them in spaces where there might be others who you think could benefit from them as well. Thank you all for your time. I look forward to starting up Seminar 2 of the Thought in Motion series in a few weeks and celebrating 500 subscribers once we reach that milestone. Be well.